Hello everybody, welcome back to Quali-Tea time. And today I am breaking a fair few of my rules here, which I figured was probably like a decent sign of that this is an important subject. So the first thing is, this is actually hot chocolate, because it's cold. The second thing is, I'm currently in my pajamas. I have a standing rule of never doing any kind of on-camera work in my pajamas. If I can stand it, I prefer not to even do off-camera work in my pajamas. That's just kind of a personal boundaries kind of thing for the most part. Not necessarily to say that I don't look good, or at least don't think I look good in my pajamas, but that's just my standing rule, because it gives me a degree of sense of professionalism. And I don't have my hair tied up, I don't have any makeup on of any kind, no, I'm just... This is as barefaced as you'll likely ever see me, like, down to the wardrobe, and... Yes, my desk is also a complete mess, and most of you will probably be seeing this in the early hours of the 12th of December 2019. For those of you somehow, for some reason, looking back through my vlogs over the course of whoever knows how long, the 12th of December 2019 is the date of the general election, and that will determine the course that my country is going to be taking for the next 4 or 5 years, depending on how long it takes for us to get yet another Prime Minister. We've had 3 in as many years, so it's a bit nebulous, really. I'm making this video because I know that probably everybody that watches my videos either can't vote for whatever reason, maybe you're too young, maybe you're just not a UK resident, or such, or has probably already been made well aware of my position on this election and probably already is planning on voting for exactly who I'm about to talk to you about. But nonetheless, I figured I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't get some kind of video out telling you what is at stake with this particular election and how it's going to affect me. My content, my partner, my life, essentially. So, to elucidate those who may not have somehow heard about this, we have 2 major parties. 3-ish. 2.5, we'll say, in the UK. We have the Labour Party, who are chiefly for the working force, for the lower classes and such. We have the Conservatives, otherwise known as the Tories, who are chiefly for big business and whatnot, and are very old as a party. And we have sort of the Liberal Democrats, who tend to be a bit opportunistic, have very, very, very rarely gotten into any degree of power, but can occasionally be useful in keeping the other 2 parties in check. There are a whole host of smaller parties in various niches around the country, and around the Commonwealth, the islands and whatnot, but for the most part, these 3 are the ones you need to know about. The Liberal Democrats are, again, as I say, they're opportunistic. They're supposed to be the party of the students, but they've frequently screwed over students, and I know this because I voted for them when I was a student. And then there's the Labour Party, who, again, have chiefly been relatively uneven. They're supposed to be supporting workers' rights and whatnot, but they frequently have been associated with large economic just sort of problems every time they've gotten into power. I think there was a statement put out recently that said that Labour always ends its term with a economic disaster. Can't really speak to that personally because I haven't been alive for pretty much any of them, but bear that in mind. That said, they are currently helmed by a man known as Jeremy Corbyn. He's a controversial figure in a lot of ways, in part because he's been seen by some to have been previously a supporter of the IRA, who officially are a terrorist group. The spin doctors will instead tell you in his favour that he's actually got a history of standing up for the underdog or the oppressed, that kind of thing. And he's come to power very recently in the Labour Party, and he's now put out a manifesto which has been a huge whirlwind for the Labour Party because it is incredibly progressive, it is incredibly based on public spending, it is incredibly based on supporting the impoverished, the young, and ensuring that everyone gets good support, good equipment, good education, all manner of things. And this also came with a huge spending budget, which is larger than the Conservatives have done in a long while. It's actually smaller than a lot of budgets in Europe, and it is fully costed based on new taxes that they will be putting out. That tax plan has also got some flack because it will be increasing a lot of taxes, but it's doing them in the marginal fashion such that the people that will actually be seeing any kind of change whatsoever are already earning 80,000 plus per year. I don't even make like 15,000 a year, so that should give you some idea of how big that number is. In reality, virtually nobody in the UK is going to be paying higher taxes. The ones that do will, for the most part, not even notice them. They're going to be like, the vast majority of people that get affected by these taxes are going to be spending maybe £10 a month extra. That's it. But he's come out, and now that brings me to the Tories, the Conservative Party. And they have held power doggedly, roughly, for about the last decade. And in that time, they have made things upon all levels worse. They have reduced funding for the NHS, which has led to staffing issues, equipment failures, and widespread problems. They have regularly cut all manner of social works, so we now have more than 20 plus million people in poverty than when they took power, and the list goes on and on and on. They were heavily involved in the Grenfell fire recently that claimed the lives of a great many people. There was another one fairly recently related to the same kind of cladding that they approved because they deregulated it. They're the ones that sent us into Brexit, is the very, very short answer. It's a lot more complex. They're actually a lot more evil than Brexit alone would suggest. There's a lot of suspicion that they're actually trying to push forward Brexit so that they can make a whole ton of money and or keep a whole ton of hidden money very safe from UK taxes. And they very recently ended a policy known as austerity, which was basically cut everything, don't spend any money, leading to all the problems. That said, following this end of austerity, they haven't actually committed to any new spending for the most part. They've committed to some spending, but not nearly as much as they actually cut. And they are helmed presently, I say presently because again, we've had 3 different prime ministers in the last 3 years, and all of them were Tory, because that's the head of their party. So, yeah. The head of their party currently is Boris Johnson. He formerly made a name for himself in being the mayor of London. That is now a position held by Sadiq Khan, who is much more pleasant, so as to say. And to put it mildly, Boris Johnson is a joke. He is a buffoon, a clown. This has been his public persona his entire life. He's a complete idiot, and there's a lot of signs that he's actually a complete idiot in general. But he's also a very callous, cruel, and selfish individual. The Labour Party have this big new manifesto. The Tories have not released any kind of new manifesto, and they are running very much on a platform right now of getting Brexit done, meaning yank us out of the EU hard, fast, and pretty much like ripping the bandages off of a severe burn victim, which is predicted by basically every single economist that has looked at it to be disastrous economically. Other economists have also pointed out it'll make a very small number of people very rich if they do this. So again, yeah. And that's the broad strokes. That's how things are going to shake down. And for me, personally, here's what's going to happen if the Tories get into power. The first thing that will probably happen is that the NHS will be dismantled in a large fashion, maybe not officially, there might be some shell of it left still called the NHS, the National Health Service, for those of you wondering. But the vast bulk of it is going to be hired out to United States medical and pharmaceutical firms, which will mean prices skyrocket. The budget for the NHS will then also probably be slashed further, because that's kind of their thing. It was founded by Labour, so they're not really a fan of it. And that will mean that people like Fuzz will have a lot of trouble getting medication they need for depression, as well as for other various ailments. It will mean chemotherapy is basically unattainable, which would have been a huge problem for my grandmother who passed away at the start of this year. We can expect a knock-on effect on gender clinics, which is going to be a problem for me moving forwards because it will mean there is basically not a ghost of a chance that I'll be able to address any of my dysphoria, and that's going to have a knock-on effect on mental health in turn. See previous statements about depression. We can expect a lot of problems with that alone. My other surviving grandmother is also sick, is probably going to die within the next 5+ years, definitely not the next decade, which means that the cuts to the NHS are definitely going to be felt by her. Not that she quite realizes this. So her life may be measurably shortened by this as well, which would mean I've lost about 75% of my grandparents in the span of about a decade. Wouldn't be very pleasant, certainly. Furthermore, the Tories instigated a system known as universal credit, which has replaced a large number of social support platforms, including working tax credit, which I was previously on and getting along quite fine. However, universal credit has kicked a lot of people off of their social benefits that have kept them alive in many cases, and now has a whole ton of people struggling to eat, let alone keep their houses warm in winter, and this is predicted to be a pretty damn cold one to begin with. Universal credit is a horrible system. The Tories will absolutely uphold it, and one of the major things that Labour is campaigning on is to dismantle it, so to replace it with a better, kinder system, one that has better funding and better understanding. So it's quite probable that social services will see a cut if the Tories are continuing in power, which will make things even harder for me than it has been already under universal credits. Under universal credit, I still have to look for work. And about 3 years in, it's fairly safe to say I'm not finding anything anytime soon, so I will be fully subject to whatever they do with the rest of the system. I'll probably have some turbulence if Labour get rid of universal credit, but it's fair to say I'll probably be better off with whatever Labour comes up with. And that's not even predicting what will happen economically with the UK. Our currency will probably see a significant tank, because it always does every single time we even get close to Brexit. So that will make it harder for me to afford things like power, internet, food, and all manner of other things, really. So whatever economic straits they throw me into are going to be even harder to actually survive. And yeah, it's not good. Whatever happens with this election is going to directly affect me. It's going to directly affect Fuzz, and it's going to directly affect my ability to do any kind of work. I'm not diagnosed with any kind of depression, but boy howdy would this certainly seem like a great enough catalyst if I didn't already have it. People are going to die based on this election. Maybe not me, but people are definitely going to die. Whether they die in a hospital bed, if they can find one, whether they die in a burning building, whether they die shivering in the cold, in the dark, in winter, whether they die of starvation, whether they die because somebody got desperate enough and broke into their home to try and find some food or something that they could pawn off for more food. Whatever happens with this election will determine how many people die over the next 5 or so years, presuming, of course, that the Tories are ready to relinquish power after that period, because they've held it for about a decade now, and there's every sign that they're about as corrupt as Donald Trump in the US, and maybe even backed by Russian influences. So this might actually be our last election if we're not careful in how we vote. Now, never trust a politician by their campaign promises. I get that. Labour has definitely had a history as many other policyholders of actually just reneging upon their promises and whatnot. I get it. That said, what they're putting out right now is winning them a lot of support, and it's a fool of a politician that abandons what gets them a lot of support. And what's more, I would rather die because I supported someone with a positive message than die because I was killed by the face-eating party, as it were. So, there's that. But it's an absolute certainty that the Conservatives are going to burn what little is recognizable of the country I grew up in to the ground. And I feel like I shouldn't have to say that I don't want to see that, but yeah. So here I am, in front of you, basically begging you at this stage to please look at where you are, look at all of the things the Tories will accomplish if they get back into power once again, and vote tactically. It's not necessarily possible for every single county in the UK to have a Labour majority and therefore Labour wins. The numbers are very steep, the numbers are very close, and in some counties it will be much easier for a different party to be voted into power than it will be to get the Labour Party into power. I'm okay if we end up with a hung parliament, because it will mean that the party of basically face-eating will not necessarily be able to enact what they want to. A Labour hung parliament would be much better, but a Conservative hung parliament is still better than a Conservative parliament. A hung parliament, by the way, is basically a coalition government. Just more than one party holding sway and such. Previously, the Conservatives have done that before, once with the Liberal Democrats in my lifetime, and once now, most recently, with the Scottish National Party, which did not go very well for us. Actually, it wasn't the Scottish National Party. That's incorrect information that I'm remembering. But it was a very unpleasant party, suffice to say, with an extreme minority chosen by Theresa May, the then leader of the Tory party. It's been a tumultuous 3 years. Don't worry if I forget if I misremember something here or there. If the absolute majority of you, if you are able to vote in this election, should absolutely vote Labour. If Labour are not the most likely party next to the Tories to win in your county, absolutely vote for the next most likely party to win over the Tories. We need to get them out of power. Because if we don't, then I'm going to be on camera basically every week for the next 5 years, dying slowly and telling you about the people that have died slowly. And make no mistake, a vote for Tories is murder on your hands. A vote for Labour is at least a vote for something slightly better. That's all I've got for you this week, I'm afraid. Catch you next time.